Item 4, High-Level Panel on Energy Transition for Sustainable Post-COVID Recovery. The Assembly has before it a background document with the same title, contained in A/11/BN/1. Under this agenda item, the Assembly will take stock of the ongoing trends in energy transitions and recovery, with the view to drawing out the strategies to advance economic, social, and climate priorities simultaneously, reinforcing the synergies between the different agendas. The session will seek to highlight experiences and concrete actions that can accelerate the energy transition in support of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. This year is full of excitement, is full of challenges, is full of opportunities too. Let me provide some context for our discussions today. In the current post-COVID context, even if still in a COVID context, we have witnessed the extent to which the energy transition is at the core of all the discussions in every single country, in every single stakeholder, aimed to contribute to their recovery. Consensus has been widely achieved on the need to draw green stimulus package to counter the economic damage from the pandemic, while making our economies more resilient, investing in the future, creating new jobs, facilitating the access to modern sources of energy, modernizing our industries, and getting fit for the future. This is an extraordinary opportunity to accelerate a long-awaited energy transition based on cooperation, on common learning, on solidarity. IRENA estimates that renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions together offer over 90% of the mitigation measures needed to reduce energy-related emissions. It improves the climate response. It improves the connections to the health response that we all need in our cities, in our homes. And we know that the energy transition goes way beyond renewable energy and energy efficiency. The energy transition is also about healthier cities, non-motorized mobility, direct electrification, renewable hydrogen, energy storage, decentralized and digitalized energy systems, district integration and energy demand management, among many other initiative technologies that will allow us to reach a climate neutral 100% renewable future. We also know this transition needs to be just, acknowledging those groups and sectors that will be unfairly affected by this transition and protecting them, particularly the most vulnerable. We also know that this connects to the aspiration of many people to improve the households, to improve their opportunities for the future to come. I'm happy to say that these are the focuses, the pathways that we are undertaking also in my home country, Spain. While we are enriching our climate neutrality objective by 2050 in the law and building a robust regulatory framework for the energy transition, we are now working on developing an ambitious recovery plan to the COVID-19 pandemic. The European Union is pushing all European countries to concentrate their recovery plans on the green and digital transition, scaling up renewable energies such as wind and solar, heavily investing in energy efficiency improvements in buildings and the industry, and electrifying our transport. The European Union is also leading by example, as it has recently agreed to increase its emissions reduction target by 2030 compared to 1990, from 40 to 55%. But this is not the case of Europe, and that's all. All over the world, at different scale, with different approaches, with different focuses, we are seeing countries pledging their climate neutrality goals by mid-century. We are seeing governments and societies striving in order to deliver a much more healthy and sustainable future. And this should be based on cooperation, working together, reinforcing our common understanding of the future to get will be an important way to get it in the years to come. Dear members, this trend has just only started. According to the latest data, net installed renewable capacity will grow by nearly 4% globally in 2020, reaching almost 200 gigawatts, while renewable capacity accounted for almost 90% of the increase in total power capacity worldwide. While in 2019, renewable energy and other green technologies attracted investments worth $824 billion, between 2021 and 2023, IRENA expects that such investment will reach at least $2 trillion. These figures show the energy transition has just begun. It is therefore important we take this opportunity to accelerate the energy transition in a way that it is just, balanced, inclusive, ambitious, aligned with the scientific consensus, aligned with the needs of the people. I would like now to invite the Director General for his introductory remarks. You have the floor, Director General.
Thank you, Madam President. You provided an apt outline of where we find ourselves at this moment in time. The world entered the new year ravaged by COVID-19 and beset by a series of interrelated and stubborn challenges. The pandemic exposed the vulnerabilities that continue to define the lives of too many around the world. It is no longer possible to ignore this, and our co-dependencies have been made abundantly clear. Putting the energy transition at the heart of the crisis response will be essential, as you say, to any recovery and to building resilience for the future. We have been following closely the developments around the world and with each of our members. The diversity of country needs, abilities, priorities, and strategies has been striking. We will surely see this also in the upcoming discussion. But finding the way out is possible, and this is where global cooperation becomes indispensable. IRENA is at the disposal of its membership, so we are to serve here, seeking your views and how to best leverage the agency's global mandate and forward-looking mission to accelerate energy transition in support of economic and social resilience for all. We have shown in the IRENA's post-COVID report how prioritizing energy transition can help policymakers tackle multiple priorities. With our permission, Madam President, and before I hand back the floor to you, I'd like to show a short video that captures some of the key findings of our analysis. And I look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Mr. President.
2020 was a challenging year in so many ways. The way the world responded gives us hope. Countries, business, scientists, and communities came together to protect and prevail. For the first time in history, a vaccine has been developed in less than 1 year. The pandemic revealed the vulnerability of our current fossil fuel-driven economies, but it demonstrated the reliability, strength, and resilience of renewable energy. Renewable energy combined with energy efficiency can reduce 90% of the greenhouse gas emissions to build a climate-safe world, creating much-needed jobs and new economic development. The International Renewable Energy Agency provides an agenda for resilience, development, and equality. IRENA's post-COVID agenda shows that dedicated recovery measures can create up to 6 million new jobs within the next 3 years. The agenda provides us with a path to achieve a swift and just recovery, along with the objectives of the UN Sustainable Development Agenda and the Paris Agreement, leading us to fully decarbonize the global economy by mid-century. As the challenges transcend national borders, we need to combine efforts and find solutions through a strengthened international cooperation. This IRENA assembly provides us with a unique opportunity to accelerate our path to a clean, resilient, and fair energy system, and will set the tone for concerted actions on energy transition in 2021. We must act now to energize healthcare, set in motion long-term plans to climate neutrality, and to scale up investment in renewables as a proven solution for a resilient energy system. Let future generations look back on 2021 as the moment the world came together to create a more sustainable, resilient, and fairer world.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this very beautiful video. I think that it provides some flavor of what we expect from all of us, from our efforts. This year has been a terrible year where we have learned to appreciate even more the work, the efforts of the people working in the health systems in our country, of those taking care of us to provide food, to ensure that all the needs that we have at home can be covered, or where we have been missing the love, the warm contact with other people we love, we like, and we enjoy to be with. And it has been a terrible year for all of us all over the countries. And it is also with the window of hope that we look into 2021 as the moment where we can build better, where we can shape a different future, where we can accelerate all our efforts. As I mentioned earlier, this session will be the session where we will be hearing insights from a high-level panel of speakers on this subject, how we can build, how we can shape, how we can construct together a different future. The discussion among the different panelists will be moderated by Mr. John Defterius. After this discussion, I will present some conclusions. I am fully aware that some of the panelists have not connected yet. They are not yet online. They will be joining because we are a few minutes ahead of time. But I'm sure that Mr. Defterius will have the capacity to facilitate and animate this very interesting discussion, so to inspire our minds to keep us thinking on how we can do even better and how we can land all the willingness that we are breaking around in order to facilitate this energy transition, celebrating the first day, the first year we are willing to identify this as a priority for the humankind. So let me now hand over to Mr. Defterius. Sir, you have the floor. You are muted. I think you need to unmute your micro.
There we go.
Perfect.
Madam President, thanks very much. I appreciate that. And Deputy Prime Minister, it's good to see you again, and thank you for the invitation. Just an alert that the President had suggested here, and that is that we're going to start about 15 minutes early. We have some very high-level ministers and representatives from the European Union already online, so I just want to make sure that they have their microphones unmuted as well, and to be ready for the discussion as the others join us in, because we're about 10 minutes away. It's fascinating that we have set aside an entire discussion, Madam President, on the energy transition for sustainable post-COVID recovery. You covered a lot there, but I just wanted to kind of set up a outline or a structure to proceed here. I think this fits this year into the category of never let a good crisis go to waste. The words of Sir Winston Churchill and his declaration nearly 80 years ago, believe it or not, and coming 2 decades after the Spanish flu, which we're making the comparisons to the crisis we're going in today. As you noted, we have seen the shock of the virus, which is producing a stream of variants, and the impact that it's had on energy demand, something I know very well because I spent about half my time covering that sector, and the reduction of carbon emissions on the other, and they're all still being calculated for the year 2020. But the real question here is, can the global community, with the Biden administration set to re-enter the Paris Climate Accord, truly deliver on the energy transition aspirations we have outlined here at ARENA for the past handful of years. This is almost speaking to the choir, as they say. Oil demand was down 10% last year as global travel and passenger loads, more importantly, remain about 75% below 2019 levels. In fact, and I'm using the movie moniker here, planes, trains, and automobiles are slow to reemerge from the fog of this pandemic ahead of the task of getting the vaccine distribution, which we're covering quite extensively, of course, on CNN, not only in the G20 countries, which we see this rolling out at a faster pace, but to the developing world as well. And let's not overlook what may be the most dramatic change since ARENA has homed in on the energy transition, and that is the pressure on the power generators and the international oil and gas companies due to environmental social governance. ESG is something we talked about Friday in the roundtable as well. And this has been accelerating because of the pressure we see from financial centers all around the world and the willingness of the investors to say, we'd like to be pushing this energy transition along, which I think is a positive. Business as usual, therefore, for oil, gas, coal companies, the power generators does not exist any longer as the global citizens, and they are stepping up to the pace of their transformations while meeting the mandate to provide energy for nearly 1 billion people who, believe it or not, still are without. It's a fact that's often overlooked around the world, but again, not in the ARENA community. As Madam President suggests, we have a fantastic lineup that's still coming on stream here, but we certainly have more than a handful to get our debate going. They'll be called upon for a 4-minute statement. I'm just going to ask you to adhere to it because we want to get 2 rounds of follow-up questions in. I want to invite the panelists themselves, and this is directed to the panelists, to use the chat box that's available. So if you want to have me ask a follow-up question to any of the peers on the roundtable, it is being used by the chat box and it's being fed to me via our chat group here at ARENA. Finally, the social media platform has been consistent since we started talking since last Friday. It is hashtag ARENA11A. I would say because of the theme of our roundtable today, I would add hashtag energy transition because it's what it's all about. Thank you for those who are coming in early to the conversation because we'll utilize you. I think it's great because we can go to His Excellency Raj Kumar Singh, the Minister of New and Renewable Energy in India. He can only join us for an hour today because of a pre-existing appointment that he had. So let me call on His Excellency Minister Singh and let us know the priorities and how they have evolved over the last 12 months, Minister. I had a chance to visit India in the last year for the Global Energy Challenge, a program we were producing for CNN, and the dependency on coal, but at the same time, the Prime Minister of India pushing ahead with a very aggressive transition plan while trying to sustain growth and, as I was saying, get those who don't have access for energy on the grids or on their remote devices to have access like everybody else around the world. Minister Singh, the floor is yours for up to 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Her Excellency, Mrs. Teresa Rivera, President of the Assembly, His Excellency Francisco La Camara, the Director General of ARENA, fellow ministers, ladies and gentlemen. We've just been through a pandemic, the likes of which the world has not seen ever. There have been pandemics before, but never a pandemic which actually hit all parts of the world at the same time. This was a major challenge. But if anything, it demonstrated that actually we are all in one boat and there is no alternative, there is no second planet. Now this, if anything, should make us alive, and most likely it will make us alive, the fact that there is a challenge which is as grave as this pandemic, which has been staring at our face for a long time, and that is the challenge of the environment, the declining environment. This is something which our government takes very seriously, has been taking very seriously ever since our government came to office in 2014. Now, this will just indicate to you how seriously we are going about it. In our NDCs in Paris, COP21, we had pledged that by 2030, 40% of our installed capacity will come from non-fossil fuel sources. Now, I'm happy to inform you that already about 36.5% of our generation capacity is coming from non-fossil fuel sources. We are already at 36.5% against a target of 40% by 2030. By 2030, at the rate at which we are going, our non-fossil fuel capacity will be 63% of our installed capacity. From 15 to 19, we finalized bids of about 78,000 megawatts of just solar and wind. I'm not counting hydro. And our total non-fossil fuel capacity today is 136 gigawatts. And we have another 50 gigawatts under installation. And about 22 gigawatts under bid. So we are for the past few years, we have been the fastest growing renewable energy capacity in the world, and we intend to continue being that. We have also been rated by Bloomberg as the most attractive destination for investments in renewables because of our transparent procedures and the way we are adding capacity, and every fund in the world is invested here. So we are transitioning at a very rapid pace. We've also carried out the largest expansion of access ever in the world. We added about 28 million consumers in just about 18 months. We connected every hamlet and every household in our country. We connected the whole country into one grid, and we connected every household, 28 million households in just 18 months. Now, this pace did not let up. We did not let the pace slacken even during the lockdown, even during COVID. During the lockdown period, we've added, we finalized bids of 13,450 megawatts. That was during the COVID period. So we have not slackened the pace, and we don't intend to slacken the pace. Our energy demand is growing. Every day, I find that our energy demand is about 10,000 to 12,000 megawatts more than it was in the corresponding day last year, despite the fact that we have not fully come out of COVID as yet. So it's going to accelerate. And the demand which is being created, we are filling that demand through non-fossil fuel capacities. We've carried out a number of innovations. We've carried out round-the-clock bids for round-the-clock green energy. We've carried out bids for floating solar and solar wind hybrid. So we are trying new things. We have finalized bids with storage, energy with storage. And as we see storage becoming cheaper and cheaper, I see this transition in our country going faster and faster because we are fully committed to the transition. We believe that this is something which is absolutely necessary, that we leave behind a world which is a healthier planet for our great grandchildren and great grandchildren. Now we have taken all the attendant steps as well. We installed a green energy corridor. In the first phase, that cost about $1.5 billion. Then we've come up with another green energy corridor. We are in the process of executing that. That is going to cost us about $7.16 billion. Then we have also, our overall, if you look at our vision, if you ask me what my vision is to electrify the economy and green the electricity. Very simple. Electrify the economy means we want to shift our other sectors to electricity, like mobility. So we have a program whereby we plan to have about the 11 to 12 million vehicles through electric by 2030, and we have a program for that. In the first part of the program, we had given assistance of $1.2 billion to people who bought electric cars. In the second phase of the program, we are giving an assistance of $1.36 billion to people who buy electric vehicles. So electric mobility is a priority with our government. Our second priority is shifting cooking to electricity. And of course, we are shifting electricity to renewables. And we are happy at the pace we are going. We are a large country. We are growing rapidly. And so that is providing us with the space for the transition. So this transition is actually not really been very difficult. It would have been more difficult if I did not have that space which the increase in demand has provided. Now, there are some other advantages which we have seen in our country. One major advantage is that the prices have come down. Now, because the prices have come down, electricity has become more affordable for the poorer also. So that's why our consumption is going up because of the appliances, etc., who the poor are buying, and we've connected every household. So that cost is another thing. The second advantage which it gave us was access, in the sense that we have many parts of our country which are very difficult, very mountainous, some of the highest mountainous regions in the world, and deserts as well, with one hamlet here, another hamlet about 20 kilometers away. Now, the facility of distributed generation, which renewable energy provided us, enabled us to, ensure 100% access everywhere. Now, we are trying to take this advantage to the other countries through the International Solar Alliance, which we have founded. And our next vision, of course, is one sun, one world, one grid. That's the vision laid down by our Prime Minister, whereby we believe that the sun never sets. I mean, when it sets in one country, it actually rises in another country. So if you actually connect countries, then probably your costs of storage will go down. And incidentally, you have some very major bids coming up, about 10,000 megawatts in Ladakh. That's the highest plains in the world, with a maximum insolation. It has more insolation than Rajasthan. So we are going to bid out over 10,000 megawatts there. And of course, we have already some of the largest solar parks in the world. But and our next objective is, again, offshore wind. That is another large bid which you'll see coming up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Singh, and thanks for jumping in earlier than anticipated. I'm going to circle back with you so we can get a couple of questions in before your deadline hits within the hour to leave. Let's go to Her Excellency, Ms. Andrea Meza, the Minister of Energy and Environment for Costa Rica. It's nice to have you in the virtual summit here. We're all reaching out from a distance for ARENA 2021. Ms. Meza, we're going to be limiting to a 4-minute contribution so I can circle back with the roundtable and have a dialogue amongst our panelists today. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, John, and good morning, good evening, good night. President of the Assembly, Teresa Rivera, Director General, and all the colleagues. It's an honor being here and sharing with you some remarks of this energy transition that we're all facing and how this can really also accelerate the economic growth in our countries. And this is a little bit how we are seeing this, the importance of aligning all our climate goals with the energy goals and with the development at the end, with the development plans that we have. In Costa Rica, we just finished the process of updating our NDC, and renewable energies and how to maintain a matrix based on renewable energy was one of the main goals. Our national goal is to achieve 100 renewable energy in our electricity mix without putting energy security at risk. And last year, in 2019, we had 99% of renewables, and in 2018, 99% as well. So this is something that we are demonstrating that it is possible to have this renewable matrix and at the same time have our economy moving on and going on. Of course, we know that the pandemic has affected the demand, and this is something that we are facing and dealing with. But in the long term, demand is expected to recover and rise due to our national electrification policies. And as our previous minister was saying, this is one of the central elements as well in our energy transition. One of the key aspects that we are facing right now, one way or the other, is how to really demonstrate to the citizens which are the impacts in health of this transition and also in economy. And this is, we are doing this by generating cost-benefit analysis. We just finished one cost-benefit analysis that it is also demonstrating that this is not only about environmental issues. This is also about generating welfare. And according to this study, this element of electrification of the different uses should be central aspect of our strategy. And it is what we are doing right now, promoting electrification of mobility and knowing that this is a central element in the transition. And of course, we know that this will generate a lot of impacts to the most vulnerable people, which is at the end also part of the social elements and central aspects that we want to address. So this is good for the economy, good for the people, good for the environment. And for this reason, we are putting these as part of the central development aspects that we are doing, John. I will leave it there right now.
Andrea, if you don't mind me asking you just a quick follow-up question, because you said that the cost-benefit analysis has come all square. If in my first arena, if we had that conversation 5 years ago, it wasn't the case. So the cost per kilowatt hour here is competitive across the board in Costa Rica on the renewable front. Is that the case?
Yes, and this cost-benefit analysis, and let me just make this clear point, was all about the decarbonization plan. So it was everything about the decarbonization strategy, where electrification of the different uses is a central part of it. It was not only about the energy strategy, it was a cost-benefit analysis of implementing the decarbonization plan. But the decarbonization plan is based on the idea of having renewable electrification matrix, and at the same time doing the electrification of the different uses. And the numbers are very good and robust.
Okay, thanks again, Minister Meza. It's great to have you, and thank you for being so direct. Let's turn to Germany now, and His Excellency Andreas Veit, who's sitting in for Peter Altemeyer. It's great to have you from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy. I covered this element of Germany rolling out a green plan during the pandemic, and it did set as a role model for others in the European Union. We saw France aggressively do the same, smaller countries like Denmark stepping up to unveil their plans. Where does it go from here, Minister? Please, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, many greetings from Peter Altmaier. He loved to be here, but it's impossible because they have some very intensive debates, as you can imagine, around fighting COVID-19. And this is on the table of the Chancellor this morning and also tomorrow in the next couple of hours. So thank you for having me here. Dear colleagues, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let me thank you, Director General La Camera, my dear friend Francesco, and everyone at ARENA for your work and for organizing this year's assembly. In difficult times like these, it is especially important for us to remain in close contact. We are in the midst of a global pandemic, as you know, and we are trying all we can do to vanquish it. At the same time, it is vital that we keep sight of our strategic ambitions for the energy transition and that we regard this crisis also as an opportunity for generating fresh momentum. ARENA plays a key role in this. For countries all over the world, ARENA points out ways in which they can decarbonize their energy systems and develop a future-proof, secure, cost-effective, and environmentally friendly supply of energy. Germany has demonstrated that the energy transition is able to deliver not only for the climate, but also for the economy and for society as a whole. One of the key pillars of the German energy transition is the expansion of renewable energy. For several years now, renewables have been our #1 source of electricity. In December 2020, the share reached 46% of all over energy or electricity consumption, I must say. As renewables are becoming the most cost-effective form of electricity in many places across the world, other countries are following suit. Now it is time to bring the energy transition to all the other industries and sectors, including buildings, the industrial sector, and transport. We are convinced that the industrial sector and transport in particular are areas where green hydrogen can be the key to full decarbonization. At the same time, we know that Germany cannot fully cover its domestic demand for sustainable hydrogen. This is why up to 2 billion euros from our COVID-19 recovery package have been earmarked for international cooperation on hydrogen. 2 green projects were already launched last year in Saudi Arabia and in Chile. We also used Germany's presidency of the Council of the EU in the second half of 2020 to push energy dossiers and make progress on the Green Deal. We were able to improve European cooperation on offshore wind energy, which is very important, of course, create a framework for an EU market for hydrogen, and set a new and even more ambitious climate target for 2030, under which greenhouse gas emissions in the EU are to be brought down by at least 55% compared to 1990. I think Mrs. Commissioner Kadri Simpson, hello to you, will certainly go on this point a little bit more in detail. Ladies and gentlemen, if I've managed to get one point across in this short speech, I hope it's the following. As Germany seeks to maximize and harness the potential of the energy transition for our societies, we are focusing on close cooperation with our international partners. Let us use this opportunity together, and let us do it now as we respond to the economic difficulties caused by COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Mr. Minister Feigt, thanks for joining us today, and thanks for being right on time with the 4-minute limit there. And I will circle back for questions here after we finish the first round of interventions. So thank you very much. Let's go to Ms. Kadri Simpson, who's the European Union Commissioner for Energy. We're thrilled to have her joining us here. She's from Estonia. We've heard from India so far and from Germany and Costa Rica with some very eye-opening numbers and a roadmap for the period going forward. From the European Union standpoint, and this I'll just use as an overarching question, the response that we saw during the pandemic, I would say, was kind of world leading in its efforts here. And what stage 2 would you suggest, Commissioner? Thanks.
Thank you. And Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Brussels. Well, we cannot choose whether or not a crisis happens, but we can choose how we respond to that crisis. And I believe that in the years to come, we will look back on this moment with pride as the one when we made the choice that energy transition would be a key driver to lift us out of the COVID crisis and into recovery. Prior to the arrival of COVID, we had set our sights in Europe, leading the way in the clean energy transition. And we set out the objective to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And this choice was about sustainable development, but also about growth, about making our economy and industry more competitive, modern, innovative. And after the COVID crisis, this has become an imperative. There is no way back. We can only come out of this crisis if we look forward. And since almost day one of the pandemic, we have heard the same question being asked over again. And this question is, when will we be able to go back to normal? But when it comes to energy, we don't want to go back to normal. Let's not forget that our old normal was leading us to irreversible damage for our planet and way of life. So COVID has presented us with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to leapfrog ahead in our target for climate neutrality. And this is why we are putting the green transition at the heart of our plans for recovery. Last July, EU leaders agreed on an unprecedented recovery package. Our recovery program will be reinforced by the largest ever multi-annual budget for the European Union. And green and sustainable projects will be at the core of our investment priorities. Each national recovery plan, supported by our recovery instrument, will have to include at least 37% of climate-related expenditure, and all other EU-supported investments will have to do no harm to our environment. And this means massive, quick investment where it's needed and where it matters, mainly digital and clean energy. And these investments will drive a green and jaw-bridge recovery. And the good thing is that this is not a top-down plan. Our EU goals are based on national plans, where each member state develops solutions that best suit their own national context. all member states agreed in December to the Commission's proposal for a EU 2030 emission reduction target of at least 55%. And by investing in renewable energy sources, into grid infrastructure and renovations and energy efficiency, we want to reduce energy costs, boost competitiveness, improve air quality, create local jobs, and become a powerhouse of clean energy innovation. So, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, our challenge is to provide a short-term stimulus while building long-term resilience.
Hello.
And,
Hello. Patricia, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Common to all of us. As Europe, we are ready to work together with all partners to build a better economy and better planet. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner, let me just ask you a quick follow-up here because your patience at the opening session. This is rather tricky within the European Union. We've seen some very forthright policies. Would you still classify gas as that transition fuel? We have a lot of it in the Eastern Mediterranean ready to come on stream. We have the Nord Stream pipeline with Russia. There's still quite heavy coal production in the eastern half of the European Union. How is that going to be managed over the next 8-9 years now, and then extending on the 2050 targets in your view? Is that pace of transition fast enough in your spirit?
Well, we have a target that after the transition period, also gas sector has to be decarbonized. And that's why we launched our first ever hydrogen strategy, so that we can offer a alternative to fossil fuels in the sectors where decarbonization otherwise is difficult, well, industry, long-haul transport. But indeed, right now, when our member states are announcing one by one the end date for fossil coal or lignite or peat, then some of them need to use natural gas as transition fuel.
Okay, great. Thanks for taking that question. We'll see you in the first round here of the follow-up questions, Commissioner. Thanks very much. Let me call on His Excellency, Mr. Aziz Rabah. I'm sure he hears me there, from Morocco, a familiar face at Arena, from the Minister of Energy, Mines and Environment. He did unmute his mic. For those, we'll be having simultaneous translation. His Excellency will be speaking in French. Aziz, the floor is yours. Thank you.
شكرا سيد رئيس سأحاول أن أتحدث بالعربية.
Thank you, Chairperson. As a matter of fact, I will speak in Arabic.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you for this invitation, and greetings to all familiar faces present with us in this high-level discussion. Allow me at first to reiterate the relevance of IRENA, as well as all multi-party partnerships. It goes without saying that COVID-19 has imposed an unprecedented challenge, but it could be also seen as a good opportunity to review the patterns of consumption and production and to reiterate the importance of sustainable development, as well as the need to curb the impact of climate change and to opt for a green economy. With reference to my country, by the end of 2020 and the start of 2021, I can share with you a number of decisions that have inaugurated a number of important developments, especially the launching of a new plan in order to produce electricity based on clean energies entirely and renewable energy. And we have also enacted our hydrogen roadmap and a roadmap for biofuel and natural gas at a national level.
أيضا تم اتخاذ القرار لتخصيص نسبة من السوق الوطني للشركات الصغرى والمتوسطة.
At the same time, a national market for SMEs has been created, in order to promote energy transition, which is seen quite important. And we have started the launching process.
Some options in order to support the SMEs, and we also launched new centers for scientific researches in addition to the already existing centers on hydrogen and on smart grids. And this is quite important for our country. We need to develop the renewable energy system in our country, and we launched new programs for some new energy transition in some public entities and in some social facilities, such as the cultural centers and others. And in addition, we also agreed to decrease the cost,
safeguard the competitive edge of our sectors while promoting energy transition. And we have set up our own plan to produce our own renewable energy, especially based on wind turbines, and to work on similar projects with other international partners, governments, and stakeholders. At the same time, we have intensively worked on combating air pollution and recycling all types of waste, including household waste. And in 2020, as will be the case in 2021, we have further asserted the importance of partnerships, so to ensure greater electricity connectivity with Europe, as well as with the Southern Sahara region. We have also tried to open up to other countries, not only EU countries, to work on other domains related to renewable energies. And we've also been working with our Ethiopian friends in order to opt for a new renewable energy and clean energy mix that we would like
Great. Okay, Minister, nice to see you. I thought you were going to be speaking in French this afternoon, our time here in the UAE. So it was good to hear you back in Arabic, and I'll circle back with you for the roundtable discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Let's bring in the Deputy Minister from Portugal for the Ministry of Environment and Climate Action. That is Deputy Minister Galamba, who's joining us on behalf of Minister Matos Fernandes. Deputy Minister Galamba, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam President, distinguished Director General, dear members of this Assembly. As acting Presidency of the Council of the EU, we would like to start this intervention congratulating Spain for the organization of this Assembly and highlighting the relevant role we believe energy transition can play in our global post-COVID recovery. Before this pandemic, the European Union adopted
قبل هذه الجائحة اعتمد الاتحاد الأوروبي صفقة مراعية للبيئة مكنتنا من
in line with the EU's commitment to global climate action under the Paris Agreement, and is now also a driver for fair, green, and digital recovery. In December, the European Council has been able to agree on an increased target for its green gas emission reduction from 40 to 55% by 2030. This agreement translates into concrete actions and measures on our common ambition. Decarbonizing the energy system is critical, and the EU is giving very concrete steps in order to push for this transition to happen. The European targets established in 2030, namely 32% target for renewables, are being pursued, and our ambition is already exceeding this initial target. It is true that the pandemic has put our systems under pressure, but renewables, European sector proved to be resilient and renewed our conviction on its strong contribution to jobs promotion and economic development. A more integrated energy system is also key to face these challenges. and we are working to guarantee that integration at the European level. Allow me to refer that Portugal is fully in line with this European ambition, and we are contributing in a decisive manner to support the deployment of more renewable energy power generation. Portugal achieved in 2019 57% renewables in electricity generation, and we are continuing to invest in order to go further. Additionally, we have in the last 2 years launched very successful solar PV energy capacity auctions. We bet for 2 times the world record on price. Last year, 11.26 euros per megawatt hour was achieved in Portugal. After a first set of efforts being dedicated to the deployment of renewables and electrification, we are now also mobilizing additional efforts and resources to transform the more traditional and hard-to-abate sectors, such as heavy-duty transport and heavy industry. To respond to this challenge, Portugal is investing in the production and incorporation of increasing volumes of green hydrogen and hydrogen-related products. The European Union is giving very relevant and concrete steps towards energy transition, and we believe that clean energy is at the heart of the transformation we need. Portugal is fully in line with this conviction and is ready to participate in this global effort of redesigning our energy system and to contribute with our competitive advantages to strong partnerships in this sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Minister, and thanks for sticking to that the adherence of the timeline. And we'll circle back with you again, as others in the roundtable discussion here when we have some follow-ups. Let me bring in Her Excellency Ms. Maila Izibele, the Minister of Energy and Mines from Togo. Maila, can you hear me okay? And you need to unmute your mic. Thanks a million. It's good to see you. There you go. Yeah. Oh, you had it unmuted. It's back. There you go.
Oui, c'est très bon. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs les ministres, monsieur le directeur général de
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, ministers, Mr. Director General, Madam President, the Assembly, Mr. Moderator of this meeting. It's a great pleasure to be with you today and to meet most of you. Energy transition is a current issue post-COVID in view of sustainable development and the current situation we're experiencing. We believe that more than ever before, it is crucial for our countries to strive towards a more sustainable development, and this can only be possible with a mix of new technologies, with denser electricity grids and decentralized distribution at an affordable price. In Togo, in 2017, we started an electrification campaign focusing on renewable energy. In 2030, we hope to have 50% of renewable energy in our energy mix. It is true that COVID-19 reminded us that without energy, we would not be able to cope with the vital needs in terms of education, health, and jobs, especially when everyone is working from home. But post-COVID, we must improve the quality of the economy and reduce costs and improve our telecommunications network. And energy of the future must be resilient at an affordable cost, and that can only be done with renewable energy. We must seize the opportunity post-COVID to ensure an energy transition and develop digital technologies with greater agility. The government of Togo has therefore adopted a decree on the obligation of the national deployment of electricity nationwide, entailing works to extend electricity networks and to extend our ports and airports. The complementarity is also decisive, I believe, when it relates to access to social services. To support this development, we believe that most players in the traditional energy already committed to the energy transition. But there's also a need to set up corporate and social responsibility-driven policies with organizational structures promoting favorable conditions for developing the private sector. So a reform is necessary for all companies, be they medium-sized, small, or foreign. To make the business environment more attractive, it's important to set up several mechanisms with greater tax incentives, promoting a plan for providing for training suited to companies. We have therefore adopted not long ago a law on renewable energy, granting tax subsidies and exemptions for all infrastructure works with respect to renewable energy. To support startups and not only large companies and improve their financial soundness, we also have a support program with 40% of solar installations within the framework of a project seeking to provide 300,000 households with solar energy. We have set up efficient public-private projects that will enable the success of this strategy we have embarked upon. To mobilize funding, there are two obstacles. First of all, the ability to have projects for mitigation. Secondly, financial resources. And we realize that funds have been set up along with mechanisms. And I believe we must mobilize all our efforts to support these mechanisms so that we can generate a change for a low-carbon future. Let me also seize this opportunity to thank IRENA. It is true that IRENA member countries have been able to promote energy policies, and Congo benefited from these policies. Thanks to the action of the head of state and the support of IRENA, we were able to embark upon a project to build a 50-megawatt plant, and this project will be commissioned in the second quarter of 2021, leading to significant changes in this remote region. So let me seize the opportunity to thank IRENA for that support. Thank you.
Minister Zia Blay, joining us from Togo. Thank you very much for that and the kind words for IRENA in terms of the structure, because I've been watching that for the last 5 years in terms of the investment pool. Let's bring in our physical host of IRENA in Abu Dhabi, and that would be His Excellency Suhail Al-Mazroui, the Minister of Energy and Industry here in the UAE. We'll get to some questions a little bit later, Minister Mazroui. What are your thoughts here, overarching, in terms of your timelines to the 2050 renewable transition yourself, and what we've seen during the crisis due to the pandemic and the drop in demand?
Thank you, John, and Your Excellency Teresa Ripera, the President, and His Excellency Francisco La Camera, the IRENA Director General. It's a great to host you all here in Abu Dhabi virtually, and it's a great to participate in this distinguished panel with Your Excellencies. In the United Arab Emirates, we are a true believer in the need for transition and the speed for that transition. Here in the Emirates has started with very exciting projects in renewable energy. We're targeting around 44% energy mix by 2040 to be from renewable energy, and complemented by by another 6% to total another 6%, sorry, by nuclear, totaling 50% of green forms of energy. We are on the verge of updating our strategy, which is every 5 years we update. And I'm expecting, with the prices that I'm seeing, that we will be probably either adhering to the same targets or increasing the target of renewable energy. We are so excited about bringing the cost of renewable energy down, and we managed to get the cost as low as 1.35 cents per kilowatt hour in a recent 2 gigawatt project in solar PV here in the capital Abu Dhabi. And the UAE is working in several fronts when it comes to reducing the emissions. One is the renewable target and the transition. The other one is the conservation of energy through the reducing the consumption. We're working on our buildings, that the new buildings are saving energy, as well as we are integrating solar rooftops into the new houses. We are introducing as well a new strategy in the water desalination, which will significantly reduce the carbon footprint, as we will shift from burning gas to an RO method, which will be using electricity. And we know that a big chunk of it will be coming from renewable energy. All of those strategies put UAE in as a front runner here in the Middle East with a very aggressive target. And I'm sure our 2050 target will be advancing more into renewable energy. But we believe in the competition of those energy sources. And we believe as well in adopting measures in the fossil-based power generation to reduce emissions as well. We are working on carbon capture and utilization, and we are going to increase those projects as a responsible producer. We are also trying to be also a hydrocarbon producer with a mindset on reducing emissions. So in our operations, we are targeting to become, if not the best, one of the best in terms of reducing the emissions while producing hydrocarbons. Gas is the other form of energy that we are depending on as we move on, and gas is relatively a much cleaner form of energy. We are adapting as well the highest efficiency power generation with a 60+% CCGT, and we think that will significantly reduce as well the carbon footprint. With that, John and Your Excellencies, UAE is continuing in its efforts in supporting IRENA and supporting renewable projects in other countries in the world. Thank you.
Very good. Your Excellency, just a quick follow-up question. We had a conversation for an interview that's going to take place this week as well. And you were talking also about those that are still producing hydrocarbons in the best practices, best technology in terms of, and you touched upon this with the carbon capture there, but would you say the UAE ranks, what, in the top 10 in this category, or even higher in terms of reducing that carbon footprint of the oil and gas sectors? Give us a sense of what has happened in the last year.
John, we believe that we are in the top, I would say, 5 worldwide as a national oil company in the efforts done in the highest efficiency in the production of hydrocarbon. So that efficiency, you don't get it if you are not paying lots of attention to all of the details. And we are even growing mangroves where we produce. So, and as you know, mangrove is taking CO2 as well. So we are trying to tackle the production of oil with a very sensible mindset in reducing emissions. And I sit in the board of ADNOC, as you know, in the Supreme Petroleum Council, and I know that our national oil company is in a trajectory to become the best in what they are doing.
Okay, thanks very much for addressing that. And if you can stay with us, we're going to circle back for some additional questions amongst our panelists here. So I appreciate the intervention there. Let's go to Todd Stern, who is the former Special Envoy for Climate Change in the United States. This is quite a big week, at least symbolically, with the Biden administration. And one of the first moves is to come back into the Paris Climate Accord, as you know, Todd. And there's a lot of pressure here, a lot of expectations, I should say, with the Biden administration coming to the fore here. Where would you like to start? And we'll save some for the Q&A as well. Thanks. Todd, we can't hear you just yet. I don't see your mic muted. We don't hear you yet. Do you need to make an adjustment? The microphone doesn't look muted. We can circle back if you need to. Do you want to try? I'm pretty good at some things, but lip reading is not one of them. So why don't I have the ARENA team link up with you behind the scenes, yeah? And I'll circle back to you in just a moment, right? Let's do it that way, and the ARENA will be in touch with you. We have the IT team behind the scenes there. Thanks very much, and I apologize for that. Let's bring in Ms. Damiola Okebunyi, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Special Representative of the United Nations, Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All, and co-chair for UN Energy. Damiola, it's great to see you again. Nice to have you on board here. Where did you want to start in terms of where we were last year when we actually had a chance to talk to you for our half-hour special for the Global Energy Challenge when we homed in on Africa? Please.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, my dear friend Francesco, for inviting me, and also the president of IRENA today. I'd like to keep my interventions quite brief and focusing on, the issues that we have at risk now with COVID as it relates to SDG 7. So evidence has shown that despite considerable effort, the world is at risk of falling short of many of the SDGs by 2030. In addition to the existential threats and urgent threats of COVID-19, the World Bank report shows about 150 million people might go back into extreme poverty. However, we must reiterate our focus on these goals and make sure that the post-pandemic recovery is an inclusive, sustainable, and responsive to the threat facing our planet. However, we must stand at an important crossroads right now. A lot of countries want to recover better, but they don't really have the tools to do so. And it's important, and I like what the EU Commissioner said, that all transitionary fuels have to be on the table, especially when it comes to developing countries. As countries focusing on rebuilding their economies and addressing domestic development priorities, targeted action in advance of SDG 7 has to be done. There has to be a clear focus on affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy for all that truly leaves no one behind. And this isn't energy in terms of just giving the basic level of energy, but this is energy for economic growth, because that is what is needed to get a lot of these societies out of this situation we find ourselves. There is a bright spark. I'm really happy that my co-chair, Achim Schneider, is also on the call, because in order to address this great issue, there's an ambitious country-led intervention where the Secretary General will be convening a high-level dialogue on energy during the 76th session of the UN Secretary General in September this year. We feel like this comes at the right time. We feel like it's a perfect sync with COP, of which we're also working with the COP team on the Energy Transition Council, which I co-chair. The dialogue is the first time in 40 years there's actually been a specific dialogue on energy. And we're hoping that in this decade of action, we can come up with firm, ambitious targets in line with Paris. I'm also very glad to say that IRENA is a key part of the dialogue moving forward. The overarching goal of the high-level dialogue is to promote the implementation of energy-related goals and targets, and relate the agenda for sustainable energy. I think we all have to come together globally and realize that we're not on track. and COVID has shown us is that we're all connected. So if one person does not have, there's about at least 1 billion people around the world, you can't just say, just stay at home because they have no access to electrification or they have no access to clean cooking. A major outcome of the dialogue and what we are really looking forward is concrete steps, voluntary commitment from member states in the form of energy compacts. This is also can come from companies and cities. It's really, really important that globally now we all come together and play our part and actually have a concerted effort to get people out of energy poverty, which they are in and they are falling back into, and create economic value and equitable and sustainable energy pathway forward. Thank you, John.
Okay, Daniela, I'd like to follow up with you if I can, just briefly here. Do you get the sense of urgency leading into COP26 that this reduction in those still suffering from energy poverty, and then the challenge or the acceleration of getting companies to accelerate their targets? We've seen a great buy-in by cities and regions and a lot of the international oil companies, for example, over the last 12 months since we last convened at IRENA. But is that the pace still lacking in your view? And then I'll go to Achim Steiner.
Yes, it's greatly lacking. I think the problem is that the disconnect between the energy access story and the energy transition story. And people don't realize that the energy access story has to be an energy transition story as well. We are encouraging at least the 789 million people that don't have access to electrification to be done in a clean way. And then there's still the just under 2.8 billion people that don't have access to clean cooking, which no one really touches at all. And that's where you find ridiculous numbers like there was about $131 million globally spent on clean cooking last year. And on electrification on the continent that needs it the most, like Africa, who still has 600 million people, we're squabbling about what is the best way to do it, instead of understanding that when you are in this crisis, there's a lot of different transitions that you have to go and transitional fuels to get you to a point of net zero by 2050. That is still our goal. And this is what we're hoping with the dialogue and with COP as well. First, to raise the ambition and understand that energy makes up 3/4 of the climate crisis as well, and be able to take it forward and make sure people have a new commitment to truly leaving no one behind.
Okay, thanks a lot. Again, I appreciate the direct nature of your answers and your presentation there. Achim Steiner, it's good to see you again. What has clearly changed in the last 12 months is this discussion, and Daniela talked about it briefly there, and that is a just transition. It came up in our roundtable discussion on Friday as well. And I think this is where the UNDP links up here with the work on the transition overall. I would imagine there's a sync here taking place at the UN.
Thank you, John, and warm greetings to the President of the Assembly and the Director General, dear friends and colleagues of mine, honorable ministers. Just listening to the various country presentations just now reinforces my sense that I believe in the next 5 years, we're going to see another major leap forward in terms of clean energy, renewable energy. And this may seem counterintuitive right now because the world's economies are heavily stressed, and we know that fiscal space, the ability to invest, obviously will be significantly constrained. But if you just take the last few weeks and months, you have seen announcements across different nations that actually may have seemed perhaps inconceivable even a year ago. We have raised the ambitions. I think we will see that transition accelerating. And the question is whether countries are able and willing to commit, because what you heard from the various presentations just now is that in those countries where a political commitment was made to make this transition, we know how to do this. And in the context of a green recovery out of COVID-19, this becomes fiscally even more likely. But it requires a systemic approach, as you just alluded to. A just transition is as much about a technology deployment as it is about an economic transformation, as it is also about locating that in the socioeconomic context. And perhaps just to recap, we know that we need energy pricing reforms. That has something to do with the way that an economy essentially begins to signal in which direction it moves. We need to also have a better understanding of the distributional impacts of reforms, which you just alluded to, because some of the resistance we have seen may be in the legacy sectors, but it may also be, let's say, in those communities in our societies that may actually find themselves in a regressive pricing system. That was part of the debate in France, for example. But we also need to look beyond energy generating technology. We need to have investments in energy transmission technologies. We need to invest in internet access, big data, digital innovation. We need to promote distributed generation, grid scale battery. And I just mentioned these as essentially the elements of an effective transition that is needed. And I think, to me, the moment that we are in right now is a moment of where either countries, governments, political leaders commit or they don't. We know how to do it. We know what needs to be done. And interesting enough, the argument that there is no investment, no ability to access finance is certainly very true and much more challenging for least developed countries, smaller economies. But ultimately, they are going to invest in electricity and power generation. So the question is, can they make that switch? And so our partnership, for instance, with IRENA, which is a very strong one, is precisely aiming at helping countries through the climate investment platform to look at the de-risking of domestic policy space in order to attract more investment. IRENA provides very significant technical input to countries. UNDP connects the energy transition from a climate perspective to an energy access to a clean energy economy perspective, which is why currently we are very focused with our climate promise on supporting 115 countries in raising the ambition levels in their national climate strategies. These are the sovereign national instruments of climate and energy policy. But we're also looking at new investment pathways. We need to find better ways in leveraging private capital, not just in the traditional mainstream areas of investment. And so our pledge is particularly in just transition sense, not just to look at that dimension within a society. We actually have a global just transition that needs to happen. That is where the United Nations family is focusing on, because if we leave behind many of the least developed countries, the African continent, Damilola just alluded to it, 600 million people still without access to electricity. That is also part of the just transition. We need to have a global economy, a global energy economy, but also an investment economy that can enable countries to make these transitions happen. We know how to do them. We know what it takes. And we have seen from Morocco to Costa Rica, and now within the next 48 hours, we will see how a switch can be flipped in the largest economy of the world. That is what the difference is between a country that is committed to transition and that is not. Our role as UNDP, working in 170 countries, is to help countries have the confidence, the means, and the policies with which to make that transition faster and compatible also with the climate change targets. But not to forget that access to electricity is fundamental for development. And it is in that combination of that goal, SDG 7 on energy, that the logic of breakthroughs actually will happen. So these are just a few reflections, but with an underlying sentiment, I think, John, that notwithstanding all the challenges we face, things are going to happen in the next 5 years that even 12 months ago would have been deemed perhaps wishful thinking. And that is a good signal.
Okay, very good. I'm going to come back to you for some questions on that and the role of the UN, different agencies to work very carefully together to accelerate what you were just talking about there, Achim. So thank you for that. Let's go back to Todd Stern. He's, I think, sorted out his audio problems. And Achim Steiner, Todd, made reference to the fact you can literally flip the switch and take a very different direction in the United States, although the burden of expectation is on the shoulders of Joe Biden. How would you like to pick up, Todd, and welcome back?
Well, let's start first. Can you hear me?
That's a relief. Yes, we can.
So I was in charge of climate change under President Obama, but not technology. So, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Great to see my old friends Francesco Camera and Teresa Ribera and others, Achim Steiner. I'm going to make a couple of comments. First, just on the broad climate context for the energy transition, and then get right to where the United States is now with Joe Biden coming in to office in just 2 days, inauguration in 2 days, and that is a welcome thing in the U.S. Just a quick comment about the climate context for the energy transition. There have been really very significant changes in the consensus for what needs to be done, even just since Paris in 2015, and that change has basically been a movement toward a fairly broad consensus that what we need to be aiming for is to hold temperature to 1.5, not just 2. And that has a dramatic impact, essentially, of putting pressure on all of us to get to net zero by 2050, not just 2070. And that then, of course, intensifies the pressure to move the energy transition rapidly, including in this decade. Now, the US is going to be coming back very aggressively. I think more robust climate and energy transition policy from Joe Biden than we've ever seen before. He starts with an absolutely terrific climate team. John Kerry, the former Secretary of State, is going to lead on the international side. Gina McCarthy, who is a very strong head of our Environmental Protection Agency, is going to be working right in the White House on the domestic side. And then across the cabinet, very strong team, so really encouraging. There have, even before we've got President-elect Biden taking office, there have been some positive steps that have been taken just in December in the last big COVID relief bill. It included $35 billion for energy, renewable energy, R&D, extensions of wind and solar tax credits, and tax credit for carbon capture and so forth. But you can look for President-elect Biden to put in place a very large green recovery program with a core focus on the energy transition. It will be built on 3 big pledges that he has made. First is net zero by 2050. Second is 100% clean energy by 2035. And third is to drive 40% of investment into distressed communities. That's part of the kind of just transition focus that you will see and climate justice program focus that you will see in the United States. The emphasis will be on standards and investments, not pricing. If we can get some pricing, that would be great. But that is always highly challenging in the US. I think you'll see investment in sectors including power, transport, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, R&D, and also into agriculture and nature-based solutions. Also intensified assistance to state and local governments, because that's where some of the action takes place, and to use the federal procurement power, which is enormous in the US. You'll also see a whole of government approach by using regulations built on existing legislative powers. That will include, again, the power sector, fuel economy, energy efficiency in buildings, regulation of methane, and so forth. And last quick thing I would say is that, that for those of you who follow the sometimes tortured reality of the US political system, there were 2 runoff elections that were run in Georgia on January 5th. The Democrats won both. That gives us a majority in the Senate as well as the House. It is a very narrow majority. It's 50 to 50 in the House, but I mean in the Senate, but the vice president will break the tie. So that gives the Democrats control, which is very meaningful and essentially means that more things that we want to get done legislatively, President Biden will be able to get done. So it's a very positive picture in the US. The focus on climate change has never been nearly this high, not even in 2016. So I'm quite encouraged. It's not going to be easy, obviously, but I'm quite encouraged about what we can do in the US.
Okay, thanks for the clarity. Todd, quick follow-up, if I may. On this 100% clean energy by 2035 seems very ambitious. And then due to the stimulus packages being put forward by President-elect Biden of nearly $2 trillion, can they really afford a $2 trillion Green Deal in the next year or so? Is that realistic to think that could happen?
Yeah, so your first question, you're absolutely right that the 2035 100% clean energy, clean electricity is probably the most ambitious of all of the targets, but I think it is doable. So the important clarification with respect to the stimulus packages, the President-elect has announced his first package which is essentially a COVID relief package. It's mostly focused on the virus, vaccinations, and matters like that. There's going to be a second, entirely different additional package, probably, I think almost certainly within the next several weeks, that will focus on broader economic recovery. It will have a lot of focus on what's called the kind of caregiving side of the economy, and a lot of focus on energy transition. So you haven't seen yet the president-elect's program on that, but of course he's talked about it a lot in the campaign and the transition and so forth. It's going to be big, but it doesn't all fit into that first package.
Right. Yeah, I didn't think it did. I'm just wondering if we can afford it. Is the other?
Well, I think we can afford it. The question is you know, can we get enough members of Congress to agree with us? And undoubtedly, it will end up. It's not going to be just what he proposes. It's going to go through the legislative process, but I think it'll be significant.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. Mukhtar Diop, thank you for your patience, and it's good to see you. You dovetail nicely with Todd Stern. You had the audio problems, but coming up just ahead of you, what Joachim Steiner had to say, you're Vice President for Infrastructure at the World Bank, and this more today than ever before is green infrastructure. Where do you want to start? It'd be great to hear your thoughts on this.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, first greetings to the President of the Assembly and the Director General. Thank you very much for inviting us. First of all, I think I'm very optimistic because there is a very strong coalition. The coalition that we have around renewable energy today is not the one that we had 5 years ago. So there is a total consensus around the need to have this transition, and that will make us much more powerful in making it happen. I fully agree with Damilola. We have many transitions going at the same time, and I think that one of the challenges that we have is to think about it from a multi-sectoral point of view. The transition that is happening in the transport sector will affect largely the transition which is happening in the energy sector. So transition in the energy sector will drive what is happening in digital. So one of our objectives is to think about this transition, particularly at this post-COVID-19 area, to think about it in a multi-sectoral way. We'll be putting a large emphasis in greening transportation, because we believe that green transportation, which having the right effort that we are making now on renewable, will help us getting to our target. Secondly, one of the lessons that we had from COP21, and a lot of people here were involved in the negotiation, was the coordination between the sectoral policies and the NDCs was not always very strong, which means that the targets that were set in the NDCs, the earlier NDCs, was sometimes difficult to reach. So one of the things that we would like to do is going to COP26 to ensure that there is a much better alignment between the sectoral policies and what will be proposed by a country in the NDCs. Third, we have to ensure that the private sector, which has been driving a lot of this effort of greening energy and particularly helping bringing renewable in a developing country, is not affected too much by the crisis. And we are seeing some stress in some of the PPPs that have been signed between the private sector and the utilities. And one of the a big part of the $160 billion that the bank will be putting to support countries in the COVID-19 the next 5 years will aim at ensuring financial sustainability of utilities to ensure that we continue this effort of bringing the private sector as a main driver to increasing. Fourth element is fossil fuel subsidies. We know that it's a big question, and Joachim talked about it very eloquently. Thinking about the distributional impact of this transition, thinking about how subsidies will be used would be a very important part of the recovery. So we have right now a lot of elements in place, and I think we have a lot of balls in the air. And we need in the next 6 months to use these partnerships that we have now and this coordination to focus and have a good distribution of responsibility among us to be able to tackle these important issues that we are facing. Last point is the social impact of transition. We are very much involved now in helping countries which are closing their mines, their coal mines. It has a huge social and transition impact. and often countries are not equipped to doing that, which might be slowing down sometimes the transition. So this is another area that I think I would like to bring to the conversation. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. Mukhtar, if I can follow up quickly with you. I was looking through the IRENA numbers here, and they were suggesting that the transition technologies and renewable investment in 2019 was high at $824 billion. But that would between this year and 2023, we'd need a range of $2 trillion to try to accelerate what we've been talking about here for the last hour and 15 minutes. Is that realistic to think there's that public-private capital that will come together to hit that target of $2 trillion in your view over this 3-year period?
I'm optimistic. I think that opportunities are there. We have a lot of institutional investors who are mobilizing a lot of liquidity, which are very low return with aging population in OECD countries. So if we manage to create the environment, as has been mentioned by my colleagues here, to reduce the level of uncertainty in investment in renewable, and we have very strong signal that large countries will be pushing that exercise, there is a big opportunity to mobilize international capital and direct them to renewable. Secondly, there is also the effort that in terms of rebounding, and the fact that institutions like ours will be moving to 35% of climate co-benefit, and we have a strong objective of leveraging our investment to bring additional investment. And maybe if we do not reach these numbers, I do think that the trajectory would be good if we work on policies, on subsidies, and ensure that the sectoral policies are very much aligned and are very complementary, so that what we are doing in transport makes sense with what we are doing in energy transition and in data, and leverage all this to move towards a low emission economy.
Okay, thanks for taking that question. I'm going to open up now to the roundtable. I have some questions for you that we've all taken a look at here in terms of structures, but I also want to invite the panel, if you want to follow up on an answer that's been made, just give me a wave of your pin, and I'll call on you as well, because we don't have to go to the formal back and forth of the questions if you want to follow up on any of the comments that are made. Let's go back to Andrea Mezza just a moment here, the Minister of Environment and Energy. But before I do, I see a lot of our boxes of our panel participants, but they're not on the screen. I won't call on you unless I see your face. So if you'd like to get involved in the roundtable, I'd love to have you back. So I see you, some are coming back into the fore, and I appreciate that. Andrea Mezza, I wanted to touch upon this idea of the role of the people in policy and taking ownership, and then that sort of mobilization of pressure on government and the private sector to accelerate the transition. You found this was an important issue. And what's the tone of the public in Costa Rica on this front?
And this is a very critical element for this transition. We need whole of government and whole of society approach. I think that this is a key element. We really need to engage the different stakeholders. And even in a country like Costa Rica, when we are facing economic crisis, sometimes this is not an easy task, because you are listening sometimes to some fast elements for this economic recovery. And for this reason, it is so important to really demonstrate all the benefits that this energy transition will generate, and all the social and economic benefits that this transition engage. And even in a country like ours, this element needs to be addressed with this systemic approach. And I think that what we've been hearing here is that this is about the development model. And one complex issue right now is the small fiscal space that we are facing. And for this reason, we need to be very strategic. Which are the investments that we're going to do? And in our case, we're really having a big discussion, for example, on how to improve the transport sector and really make an investment in the train and to improve the kind of public transport that we're giving to the different citizens. We're also engaging with different stakeholders, for example, with the gas station owners. This is, they're seeing these, that they are losers in this transition. And we are working with them so they can be installing charging stations for electric vehicles and helping them in this transition. And even with our big public oil company. And we are having a big discussion in how to transform the company and engage them into the hydrogen new business. And this is the kind of elements that we are doing, recognizes that we are facing a transition and that we need to give new activities for the ones that are seeing us, that are perceiving them as losers in this transition. So I think it's part of the elements that we need to really put on the table.
Okay, thanks very much for that. That's interesting. It brings a good transition to R.K. Singh of India. You have an ambitious target here for the government of Prime Minister Modi for 450 gigawatts of renewable energy by the end of this decade. And the minister from Costa Rica brought up this idea of hydrogen, and this is going to come into the mix in India as well. We're cognizant of time, so your interventions need to be a minute. Deputy Minister Singh, go ahead, it's all yours.
John, we are going to cross the target of 450 gigawatts. As I told you, we have already at about 136 gigawatts, 136,000 megawatts installed capacity. 50,000 megawatts is under installation. That makes it 180,000 megawatts. And 20,000 megawatts is under bid. That makes it about 200. The rate at which we are going to cross 500 gigawatts by 2030. Now, hydrogen does form an important part of our plans. We already have a mission on that. We have already had interministerial discussions. The first step we want to take is to transition to green ammonia, so as to reduce our imports of ammonia for making fertilizers. And we want to put them on to green ammonia. And then we want to enrich the gas, the piped gas, by injecting green hydrogen in it. Now, these are the first two steps which we are going to take. And we are also trying out hydrogen for heavy mobility, long distance mobility. We believe that for heavy long distance mobility, hydrogen mobility is something which makes sense because it's much lighter than battery. And we have already developed our own fuel cells. We already have an ongoing project on development of fuel cells. We already have developed fuel cells. So yes to both.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's bring in Kadri Simpson. We have the announcement of the Green New Deal, and I'm trying to figure out here in the next stages of what Todd Stern was saying, Kadri, as commissioner here, where do we see the transatlantic collaboration here to take the Green Deal that's been structured today, apply this transatlantic relations and the reboot with the United States back in the climate agreement to advance the cause globally, to accelerate these targets for 2050 and actually have a very successful COP26. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, I do believe that a strong global partnership is essential because you remember that the European Union launched our Green Deal before the COVID crisis. We launched it in December 2019. And the reason was that there was a strong public demand to take action, but also we saw it as our way of sustainability, sustainable.
This is Christopher speaking, still speaking.
Renewable projects or into the energy efficiency projects. It helps us during our stimulus times. And it also helps us to secure public acceptance because it changes our energy mix. Our energy sources are mainly domestic, but in some regards, we will consume more than we will produce, even if we are achieving our high climate targets, and we need international partnership to do so. And of course, in several sectors, renewable sectors, European companies are still holding global leadership. So we are so eager to exchange our technological knowledge so that not only US, but globally, other like-minded countries can learn from our experience.
Okay, thank you for taking that, Commissioner. Andreas Feicht, the State Secretary of the Minister of Economy Economic Affairs and Energy here. I wanted to get this idea of where ARENA dovetails nicely with the membership of the European Union and the largest economy in Europe being Germany, of course. In terms of the ARENA's global membership, we've heard a couple of our panelists talk about it today, the influence the ARENA's had on their investment into renewable energy. But having that sort of weight within ARENA impact the process, say, at the United Nations and the World Bank at the same time? How do you mobilize this community at a very critical window, as I was talking before about COP26? We just need to unmute your mic, Andreas, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Yes?
I can hear you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry for that. So on the one hand side, we have a lot of bilateral energy cooperation throughout the world, about 20 corporations with different countries on different continents. But besides those bilateral corporations, we need a lot of multilateral corporations. And organizations like ARENA do play a key role in this field. So what we need, and this panel shows it, we need to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and also to form cooperations between each other. So that is what ARENA can manage. And the second thing is, for me, that we need ARENA's analytical capabilities. So to help different member states of ARENA to make good governance when it comes to renewable energy and the energy transition. So a lot of things are on the way. A lot of chances are there, but also a lot of obstacles and lessons learned from early movers like Germany, for example. And to learn from those early movers is certainly very worthwhile for all the countries throughout the world. And ARENA, from my point of view, plays a key role in that play.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Minister. I appreciate it. Let's bring in Achim Steiner, if he's there. Yes, he is. Perfect. The boxes are moving around on my screen here. And I wanted to take that theme of what we talked about, the ARENA influence and in the community here, and apply it to the UN structure. And I wanted to also ask a very candid question. It was a question my daughters presented to me. They're understanding now as high school students or secondary school students, the idea of a target of 1.5. Do you find that mobilization that the minister from Germany just talked about is happening at a rapid enough pace? And what is the UN role in that process to realistically cap warming at 1.5, if it is realistic? Go ahead, Achim.
Well, I think, and Todd Stern will, I think, support me here, and perhaps Magda also with the experience we have. You know, very often over the last 30 to 50 years, whenever we have had a scientific finding that compelled us to act in terms of either phasing out ozone-depleting substances, you know, carbon dioxide, we always begin with a very sticky and inertia-driven political economy. Let me call it that explicitly. I mean, there are many who are making, you know, very good returns on the current economy, so there is that inertia. But every time, if you go back in terms of the last 50 years of environmental, let's say, legislation, it has always been cheaper and it always was faster than those predicted at the beginning of a legislative process. And I think that's precisely where we are right now. And, you know, we work very closely with the insurance industry also. In fact, Magda, with the bank and UNDP, together with the insurance companies, we have the Insurance Development Forum. Germany, in fact, was a key financer also, trying to look at insurance resilience as a way in which we can bring the cost of inaction to a very concrete reality at country level. So 1.5 is not, you know, some imaginary target that you can either choose to adhere to or not. It is a very clear threshold against which to measure action. And if you look at the fact that, you know, one of the largest economies in the world, Germany, the state secretary said earlier on, I think if I understood correctly, 46% of its electricity generation now renewable. That would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. Denmark has already surpassed the 50%, will go to 100%, and will get there. And there are, in fact, many developing countries listening to India, listening to the European Union Commissioner. I think we can achieve a 1.5 degree scenario. But, John, not on the current trajectory, not with the current politics around energy, and not with the current investment and market realities that we are facing. Because, you know, if you just take Africa, that is a continent that by 2050 will have 2 billion citizens. That means another 1.5, 1.6 billion will be added to the global energy grid and matrix over the next 20 to 30 years. Now, if that access to energy becomes a fossil fuel 20th century based access, you can not only forget about 1.5, you can forget about 2 and 2.5. That is why it is a global common objective that we need to pursue. It's not, you know, charity. This is a common interest in which a global economy, not just at national level, has to point fingers at individual countries. It's precisely what the United Nations has been trying to do over the last 25 to 30 years with, you know, a lot of setbacks, but actually would we be where we are today on the verge of having another major breakthrough in moving forward on a global commitment to acting together on climate change? No, we would not have been. And I think that is, to me, the, let's say, the hopeful outlook. We can do it. History has proven it time and again that it is doable, quicker, cheaper than many predict. But we have lost a lot of time, and that time window is what worries me the most right now.
Okay, yeah, I was hoping to hear you say that, actually, because that's the kind of the view I garner from a lot of the different sources you've been reading today, and that you brought up. Mokhtar Diop, the African issue that Håkan Steiner brought up, I think is worth addressing here, because this is that critical window to get the grids built for them, right? To get the right infrastructure in place, and that it's green infrastructure. What's being done there at the World Bank to ensure, as these birth rates remain high in Africa, that this is not a missed opportunity? Go ahead, Mokhtar.
No, absolutely. We've been working together. As I say, the power of a coalition is important. In Africa, I was responsible for the Africa region for 6 years. We worked together with UNDP, with the US administration, actually, with Power Africa, which was a big initiative, which allowed us to bring the private sector to, we worked with the German corporation to bring the technology. So there were this idea of working together. I would like to reemphasize it, because that would be the key for us to bring to have this accelerated transition. The second aspect in the conversation is that things will move in Africa. We talk about transportation. We talked about the growth of population. Those people who are coming and who are born today need to be moved around. And if we do it the way we are doing it today, we will not be able to reduce emissions. So we need to accelerate the movement of electric vehicles in OECD countries, which will help bringing that technology to developed countries. So this is a joint effort that needs to be done by OECD countries, more advanced economies, and developing countries. We need to take strong action towards reducing the export, for instance, of used car. Our colleagues of UNEP have recently released a report which shows the impact of a used car exported to Africa in terms of emissions. So all this effort needs to be put together. The need to access broadband access and bring digital, bring energy and transportation to the digital age in Africa. All these elements will start affecting emissions. And I do think that there are opportunity to invest, huge opportunity to invest. We will be using our guarantee window to reduce the risk. We have a private sector window also, which help in attracting investment in fragile states, because one of the things that we are seeing also in Africa is that you can address the large country if we still have pockets of fragility. All these efforts that we are trying to put forward will be brought down. So there is a really sectoral, a multi-dimensional approach, and not to look at solely to the technical solutions, because those technical solutions, as Hakim said, have been there and will be there, will be coming very fast. But how to have this adoption, how to create a social contract which makes us move in that direction, I think this is the more challenging things. It goes through discussing the impact of fossil fuel subsidies, to the distributional impact, to clean cooking for which affect women well-being in Africa. All these elements need to be taken into account and move out from a narrow discussion on the technical issue of energy transition.
Okay, thank you very much for jumping in on that topic, Mokhtar. Let's bring in Ms. Mila Aziable of Togo. And finding if a poor country like the state of Togo, which is pursuing an energy transition, are you getting the support realistically, Minister, that you need to keep pace with the birth rates and to accelerate the transition during this pandemic? Mila? And you need to unmute your microphone, please. Thank you.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for that question. In Togo, we set up an ambitious strategy to wait until 2030 for 100% of access for the population. This strategy was drafted with the World Bank, which supported us in this study. So the World Bank backed us. And all of these projects were geared for renewable energy. In 2030, we would like to have 60% of renewable energy installed. We have many projects for building plants in Beta, for example, that was quickly financed by the Abu Dhabi Fund, and that was spoken of at the previous IRENA meeting. A 65 megawatt plant as well, that is planned. So a public-private partnership, many projects therefore. During COVID, we received a lot of support because COVID had two impacts. First, on works. Most plants that were to be built were delayed. Secondly, the capacity for vulnerable people to have access to electricity. So we set up two programs. The first, based on a program set up in 2018 for checks to help populations by covering 40% of expenses linked to the use of solar equipment. During the lockdown, we also launched a program with the AFD supporting vulnerable people. And these programs helped us to have a very low impact on progress made in the electrification strategy. But it is true that we are facing major challenges and we will need more support. There are many mechanisms that we're not aware of. But I think that once we call on fundraisers, I think they can help us.
Great. Thank you for taking that question. I appreciate that. I'm going to go to Suhail Mazrui here and then circle back with Todd and João Galamba of Portugal. Damiola, I'd love to get your thoughts too on some of the inputs we've heard from Africa. I just need to have our panelists keep their answers to a minute. Your Excellency, Suhail Mazrui, you talked about the 2050 plan and cleaning up the carbon production here. How about consumption? And getting the mindset of the Emirati and international population that is here to participate on this path to 2050. Is that part of it? Because there's an education program underway in the UAE to raise awareness. Is it making a difference?
Yes, John, definitely. We are targeting by 2040 to reduce the consumption per capita by 40%. And that will come from two sides. One is the adaptation of the latest technologies, including AI, in the energy management in the buildings. As you know, the consumption today is done in an old fashion, and we have some trials that have proven that with few modifications, you could reduce at least 20–30% of the use of water and electricity, and that will reduce definitely the consumption per capita. We are also adopting an educational program and a demand side management with all of the utility providers. So we're talking, and we are also in the future could be adopting some measures to encourage people to conserve in their consumption. And so we'll start with education, and we're starting with what we can do as government in conversions of the buildings, the adopting a LEED standard in terms of the building codes. And I'm sure if this did not work, we will have to use some measures to work on the tariff to encourage people to conserve less.
Okay, one final quick question for a follow-up for you, Minister. Has the pandemic changed the strategy of aid to other countries in the region because of the connectivity we have in the UAE to Africa, for example, and to South Asia? Does the pandemic allow you to say, okay, we need to focus our aid on the pandemic and the recovery, or does the energy transition and energy support still stay on the radar for the UAE in a region that you can enjoy the growth if successful coming out of the pandemic?
I think, John, it's premature to see how much the pandemic will change policies. I'm sure countries now in the recovery year, which is hopefully 2021, are capturing the lessons and looking at the different formulas of their energy, and hopefully they will be conserving more and using less of the energy, because what the pandemic have showed us that you need to look at your own resources in emergency, and we are looking as well as many other countries to energy security, and part of the energy security is to consume less. So indirectly, I'm sure as we are reviewing now our strategy after passing almost 4 years since the initiation of the energy strategy 2050, we will be looking at some adoptions of the lesson learned, and hopefully that would reflect on what is good for the people, which is using less energy, and using less energy will automatically reduce the carbon footprint, and that is the cheapest way. And we'll keep telling the people that the cheapest way to save our planet is to conserve and use less of energy.
Okay, thanks for taking that question. It was popped up with some of the other conversations we've had here. We have Damiola that I'd like to have weigh in again, João Galamba, the minister, weigh in, Todd Stern, the commissioner from the European Union as well. Akim, I'd love to have you jump in. We only have 10 minutes, but I want to kind of lay out the aspirations for COP26. Damiola, if you want to weigh in also how it applies to Africa. Because I don't think the global narrative on COP26, and I'm not talking about this community here, but in overall, after the pandemic, it doesn't seem to be coming front and center in everybody's mind. Let's start with Todd Stern, the shift of Joe Biden going back into the Paris Climate Accord. What sort of lift does that give to the ambitions of the COP26?
So I think that is
Todd, just a second. Sorry about that. Mr. João, Mr. Galamba, your audio is open. We hear you, if you don't mind. Just to mute. Thank you, sir. Todd, sorry about that. It's audio-related problems for you today. Sorry about that. Pick it up.
Yeah, no problem. COP26 is enormously important, and I think the U.S. re-entry into the system is going to be a big boost to it. The central mission of COP26, as I see it, is that we get countries ratcheting up what they talked about doing in this decade, the 2020s, at a whole new level. First of all, I associate myself with just about everything that Achim Steiner said in his last intervention, but that we can get to 1.5, but we cannot get to 1.5 on our current trajectory. It's great to see countries talking about mid-century ambitions, net zero by 2050, the Chinese essentially the same thing by 2060. That's all good, but we can't possibly get there unless that kind of mentality is brought right into the 2020s. And so the notion of enhanced targets, enhanced NDCs for COP26, which again is going to be the central focus in COP26, is absolutely crucial. And I've had many conversations in the last 2 or 3 months with my Chinese friends. Tremendous step that President Xi Jinping announced an ambition of getting to carbon neutrality, essentially net zero before 2060. But it has to happen starting now, and there have been a fair number of signals coming from the Chinese that suggest that they see the 2020s as a decade where they will be fairly flat in their emissions and then start to go down in the 2030s. That's not good enough, and that's not good enough for the United States, not good enough for anybody. So I think that the focus that COP26 can bring to enhance action right now in this decade is really critical. I think the U.S. will be part of that. I would salute the leadership of the European Union, which I think who is second to none, both in terms of their mid-century goals, their goals right now, and not just goals, but their actual legislative program and regulatory program to get it done. So, so they've been doing great work.
Okay, let's go to the European Union. Kadri Simpson, the Commissioner of Energy. And I would like to have you address at the same time your aspirations for COP26, Commissioner, but at the same time, the host country is no longer within the European Union. So does this serve as any sort of slowdown or a drag on the process to COP26? Does it live up to the aspirations from the early indications? You need to
well, I think that it has been a very encouraging year behind us. We have seen so many different governments joining with climate neutrality target. And from our side, we are still continuing to lead by example. So maybe you know that we just agreed that we will raise our 2030 targets. According to the old targets, we plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40%. Now it's higher, 55%, and it has to cover all the sectors. So not only energy, but also transport, industry, building sector. And I think that this is the best way how we can attract more like-minded partners across the globe. By doing so, we will show that this is also a way how we can stimulate our economy, create short-term jobs, and of course our citizens will benefit out of it because just using less energy equals also with lower energy bills. And I truly appreciate that we have seen so many governments joining higher climate targets, and I have no well, I'm absolutely certain that this year will be a year when we will invest a lot into the renewables, and not only with our state budget funds, but private sector will get also a assurance that these kind of investments will be beneficial. Thank you.
Okay, very quick follow-up in 20 seconds. If I was going to look for a benchmark of the international oil companies that have decided to set their targets for 2050, it's a kind of a full house. The European IOCs all went to net zero 2050. We have not seen that with the Americans and some of the Asian players. His Excellency Suhail Mazrui talked about ADNOC accelerating its plans to clean up its carbon cycle. But the IOCs got the message that it's time to be a global citizen on energy when it comes to oil and gas production. You need to unmute your mic. That's for you, Commissioner. It was a follow-up question.
Yes, thank you. Well, from our point of view, of course, well, right now, European Union is one of the biggest natural gas importers, and so is the oil market, and we have had very good dialogues with our international partners. And indeed, they have to change their business model because we are doing so, and especially in our mobility sector, we are looking for new solutions, new carbon neutral solutions for vehicles, also maritime and transport and aviation.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for taking all the questions here off the cuff, but it's great to hear your inputs. Deputy Minister Galamba from Portugal, once you jump in here on your aspirations for COP26, I'll go to Damiola and finish with Achim Steiner, and then we'll have a contribution from our friends in Singapore. Zhao, please.
Well, our expectations are that as was mentioned in many throughout the session, partnerships, collaborations, and collective commitment at this stage are, of course, I would say, our top priorities to ensure that we move from plans to execution as fast as we can.
Okay, thanks for that, Zhao. Damiola, thanks for your patience. You've had a chance to hear from Mukhtar. Todd Stern talked about his aspirations for COP26 and the very high birth rates we have in Africa. It's both an opportunity, but also a challenge post-pandemic. How do you want to weigh in this, making sure this doesn't get lost in the COP26 architecture?
One thing that's really good about the COP26 is that there's an Energy Transition Council that focuses on Africa as well as emerging markets. It's just really important in all our discussions for Africa to be part of the conversation. And Africa is not as simple as giving a few solar lanterns. It's energy for economic growth. And that leads us to uncomfortable situations where, you know, the African teenager also wants to have the same things as the American teenager and the Chinese teenager. So when we're talking about energy, we really have to talk about economic growth and productive uses. And I think that's what we're trying to get to. I mean, we're obviously working with Mukhtar and Achim as well, that how do we get people out of energy poverty? And more importantly, how do we stop really heinous crimes based on gender-based violence with the fact that there's not enough clean cooking? And once we've cracked that, and we know that can be clean, we know that that can be a renewable solution, but the financing is needed and the policy and regulatory frameworks are also needed. And that's what's so key. And that's what we are trying to put together in the COP26 transitionary work, but also at the high level dialogue of the UN. Globally, we have to commit to Africa. I think that's my last line.
Okay, thank you for that. Achim Steiner, you're going to have the last word of this before we bring in an intervention from Singapore on tape. In my opening remarks, talked about ESG and the sort of pressure coming from Wall Street or the City of London, Frankfurt, Singapore, you know, Tokyo, and the rest here. Investors don't want to hold a classic carbon-heavy company anymore. Is this 2021 going to be the year where that's a recognition on the financial side, post-pandemic recognition that we could get a green recovery, and the next generation can look back and say they did the right thing in 2021 to deliver on the 2050 targets?
I think, John, you're right. We are seeing a seismic shift in, let's say, the financial system at large, and long overdue. I mean, one has to say, and I remember, you know, 7-8 years ago, and others who are on the panel will remember when we sat maybe at the World Economic Forum in Davos, at the climate conferences, we started to envisage that economy that is unmistakably moving towards a clean energy economy. When we talk about stranded assets, and, you know, eyebrows were raised and people said this is just you know, theoretical talk. You have seen, you know, whether it's ExxonMobil or many other funds have billions wiped off just this year in terms of their stock market value because of how they are essentially being valued by financial markets. So I think we are on the verge of seeing a significant shift. I still would not say that it is a groundswell. I mean, it is growing. I think particularly interesting is that many of the institutional investors are beginning to echo where the public is, where your daughter is asking the questions. You mentioned her early on, and I really want to emphasize how important young people have been over the last 24 months. I think we should never underestimate that. When I talk to Bernard Looney, who heads BP, Claudio Descalzi of Eni, I mean, these are not people that I need to convince about what lies ahead, but it is our children, is that next generation that is stepping out onto the streets that's making us all conscious that something has to change quickly. So financial markets are still relatively slow, they're risk averse, and again, they will neglect particularly the investment needs in developing, least developed countries, smaller developing economies, because traditionally it's too complex to get there. we need to find tools with which we can, lower that threshold. SDG Impact Investment is an initiative we launched in UNDP to try and help countries to attract private sector investment precisely into this. Domestic financial markets are important also in developing countries. Sometimes it's much cheaper to borrow within an economy than to try and convince an outsider to invest, and then the financial markets follow. So there's a lot of de-risking work to be done. But let me end just with one remark, because you asked it on COP26. At its simplest, the way we need to prepare for next year in Glasgow, for this year in Glasgow rather, is raised ambition. I think everything will depend on that. It is the signal to the markets. It is the affirmation that governments really have taken the Paris Agreement seriously, because as we know, the agreements from 6 years ago were not sufficient to address a 2 or 1.5 degree target, but very pragmatically, and I think ingeniously, into the Paris Agreement, colleagues designed this ratcheting up mechanism every 5 years. Glasgow is the moment of truth for the Paris Agreement and for every member state to demonstrate whether they're stepping up with increased ambition. That has to be the simplest way of summarizing what lies ahead for us. And I think we are seeing some remarkable things happening across the world right now on the NDCs, which will be the vehicles to demonstrate that. Thanks, John.
Okay, nice to see you, and thanks for that. As I noted, we, because of logistical reasons and just the time zone difference, His Excellency Tan Si Leng, who's the minister in the Prime Minister's office and the second minister for trade and industry and for manpower in the city-state of Singapore, has a contribution on video. I'll come up after that and pass over to Her Excellency Teresa Rivera. Let's go ahead and roll that tape from Singapore, please.
Director General La Camara, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend my appreciation to the International Renewable Energy Agency for hosting the high-level panel on energy transition for sustainable post-COVID recovery. 2020 has been an extraordinary year. This COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on the global economy, and the energy sector is not spared. As we emerge from this crisis, it is important for the global community to prioritize a sustainable post-COVID-19 recovery. At the Singapore International Energy Week last year, we announced our vision to be a bright green spark for the world, where our energy management systems can be an inspiration to urban societies around the world. To achieve this, we will do three things: live green, power green, and design green market structures. First, to live green, we will review the way we consume and produce energy by leveraging innovative technological solutions. Singapore will continue to invest in research and development. For example, under our Research, Innovation and Enterprise 2020 plan, Singapore had committed around 1 billion Singapore dollars to research in urban solutions and sustainability. This will cover renewable energy and carbon capture to help us manage our transition to a low carbon, low emissions economy. Next, to power green, we will explore new energy sources to achieve a greener energy mix and leverage energy storage systems to support this transition. We are accelerating our efforts and will almost quadruple our solar capacity to 1.5 gigawatt peak by 2025 and to 2 gigawatt peak by 2030. The government has also set aside 49 million Singapore dollars to fund low carbon energy research and to test bed solutions in hydrogen and carbon capture, utilization and storage. And lastly, to develop green market structures, Singapore supports multilateral efforts under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to land a global deal on carbon markets. We are also working with like-minded countries and partners to build a carbon trading market in Singapore, where we are able to trade with verifiable standards that provide assurance to both buyers and sellers. As Singapore lacks alternative energy sources, Singapore has always had to find creative ways to tackle our energy challenges. COVID-19 has further galvanized countries around the world to adapt and rise to the challenge. Going forward, international collaboration will be vital to strengthen our energy ecosystem. Singapore is doing its part to promote renewable energy development in the region. And of note, during Singapore's chairmanship of the ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting in 2018, ASEAN and IRENA signed a memorandum of understanding to establish dialogues and joint activities to promote renewable energy in the region. This partnership demonstrates IRENA's commitment to unlock Southeast Asia's vast potential to harness renewable energy and contribute to the attainment of sustainable development in ASEAN member states. Last year, ASEAN energy ministers endorsed the second phase of the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, which sets out an ambitious 5-year plan for energy collaboration. Under the new plan, we enhanced our energy intensity reduction target to 32% by 2025 and added a new target for 35% renewable energy share in installed power capacity by 2025. Singapore stands ready to work with IRENA and the global community to support and scale up cooperation on renewable energy investments. Thank you.
Once again, Tan See Leng, who's the minister in the Prime Minister's office, addressing the plans for Singapore not only in the recent past and the architecture for the next decade, as he was discussing there. I want to thank the high-level participants that stayed with us here to the very end. We have nearly 400 participants still active online. I appreciate that because of your interventions. Our host minister, Suhail Al-Mazrui, good to see you, and participating at the Atlantic Council. I appreciate that. And the Minister of Togo taking some surprise questions from me as well, but driving home some of the points that we had. I greatly appreciate it. I wanted special thanks before I pass it on to the President of the Assembly, to Elizabeth Press and Anastasia Kefaloudou. We worked intensively over the last week with probably at least 100 emails and exchanging of documents to get us to where we are today. So I appreciate always the support of the Directorate at ARENA in my 5th year here. And of course, to the Director General, Francesco, for the invitation again. Teresa, I'll pass it back to you and with my thanks. Thanks.
The other way around, thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Mr. Defterius, for guiding this high panel and shaking a little bit all of us in order to identify concrete ideas that can allow us to push forward this very interesting agenda. And allow me also to add my thanks to all the panelists for a very focused and comprehensive set of ideas that have come up from this conversation, with a great diversity of approaches and a very strong richness of different elements that at the final picture. So a very interesting set of proposals and reflections to come forward. I guess that we have heard about development and prosperity. We have heard about access to energy and energy transition, and we have heard about climate and cooperation at very different levels. We have heard about climate justice and how the different agendas identify the synergies that can allow us to build a win-win final game where we all contribute to help around agendas, but also the agendas of many of our partners in very different corners of the world. We have heard examples from the Far East to the Far West, from north to south, and so many countries taking steps to push the energy transition and scaling up renewable energy mainstreaming, direct electrification, promoting energy efficiency, conducting ambitious, innovative approaches and policies to ensure that all the richness related to the biodiversity of the different options in this agenda can help to get the goals. This is also the case of Spain. Of course, we also have identified our own targets and have identified the needed change of policies in order to fulfill our goals, and anticipating some of these goals and accelerating some of these policies so that it fits with the recovery agenda. I think that this is something that it is very much present in all the discussions and all the comments that we have heard. The COVID pandemic has offered us an opportunity to bounce forward, not backward. And it seems the world is up to this opportunity. As some of you said, it's not coming back to the old normal, it's building a new normal. And this is something that fits with the terrible new normal in climate references that should help to avoid the most harming, the most terrible effects of climate change. And we have for some stressing the centrality of renewables for energy transitions and reaffirming that the agency can lead, can facilitate this transformation and the global efforts in this regard. There have been some very strong ideas coming up from the debate. First, the claim to engage all stakeholders. We need to highlight the social and economic benefits of energy transition and engage those who may feel left behind. This is something that Andreas stressed, and I think it is an idea we all share, how we can build alliance partnerships and count on everyone's willing to be part of the solution and defining the future we want to build. IRENA has a great role to play, as I stated and you all have said, facilitating the peer learning, removing barriers that first movers are encountering, or mobilizing analytical capacity. I think that this is something IRENA's team is used to and is improving year after year and assessment after assessment. So it's encouraging to still hear to so many of us stressing how far we still need to go and how deep we trust you in order to facilitate this work forward. 1.5 is still within reach, but it is not easy. We need quicker, cheaper energy transition pathways. The sense of urgency stressed by Achim when talking about development, access to progress, to prosperity, and the narrow window we have in front of us, the role of finance. We need to bring the vast of inaction at the forefront. Insurance, resilience, green investment, so many things that should allow us to think in terms of what does green finance, green prosperity, green budgeting means for this deep transformation. The domestic efforts, the need to strengthen and work in a cooperative manner is very strong. This is something that we have heard connected to many of the issues that have come up, including when you, John, were asking about the expectations for COP26. I think it's quite empowering and quite inspiring to hear so much commitment and so much share willingness to get a very successful outcome, a much more engaged world towards a fully decarbonized future, and to what extent Glasgow is such an expected and desirable event to come. Climate, energy, recovery are part of this agenda. This is a clear recognition of IRENA's work. I heard some requesting that IRENA needs to keep on working, as I said, on the green recovery. The green recovery is not something that it is to be taken as a done. We need to build it. And IRENA's global mandate in tackling the recovery, development, and climate priorities simultaneously can be very, very instrumental in this point in time. I'm convinced the energy transition is going to be the buzzword this year. And given the enormous momentum for climate-related transformation and all the new expectations or re-energized expectations in the international agenda, so many expressions of interest, commitment, and engagement coming from so many societies and countries is very, very inspiring and optimistic. Two good examples are the high-level dialogue on energy organized by the UN General Assembly in September, the COP26, as you said, chaired by the United Kingdom in November. At the time, the Paris Agreement requires to revise and increase our ambition. With regard to the United Nations Secretary General High-Level Energy Dialogue, we took note of the request to IRENA to play an active and leading role in preparations for and the dialogue itself. But let's not forget, this should be a human-centered agenda, thinking about every single person, human being, understanding that the comfort of each of us, including all the transitional difficulties that we may find, or all the needs to improve the development opportunities and the prosperity opportunities for those that have felt left behind, need to be part of our agenda. Otherwise, it would be very, very difficult to win this race. This is not just a technical race. It is a human and social race. It is a race to ensure that we can do things differently in a much more human-oriented manner. So before closing, let me pass the floor for any thoughts from the Director General. I'm sure that Francesco will be willing to share with us some wise thoughts on how to go forward. Francesco, the word is yours, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me, I know that they've gone, but I really wish to thank John for his moderating role. I think that was very difficult to maintain alive a debate with so many participants and having a meaningful dialogue. I think that he did very well. As all the participants, they've been passionate, they've been ready to answer to all sometimes also provocative questions by John. And I have said that altogether, they set the stage of the ministerial events and the follow-up of this General Assembly. And I've also been amazed by the fact that from the east to the west, to the north, to the south, everyone is engaged in trying to be more ambitious in the path to COP26. And I think this is also the strength of ARENA, having the capacity to put in place and let's discuss people representing government, people representing international organizations, and also high-level experts and talking all together, as has been today. And I think has been a good idea from the President of the General Assembly to have also someone coming from the climate field. So we had the chance to let the people from climate and energy talking together. That sometimes is not so easy in all government. And I think it's been important to recall that the 1.5 is possible, but it's very challenging. And how important is the role of the stakeholders, so getting everyone on board. And I welcome the positive approach coming from many. And I want to mention the words of previous Commissioner Cañete that I've been lucky to have been discussing with in our youth forum. He said that in 2015, no one really was putting climate in the political agenda. The fact that is in 2019 already the new EU Commission put the new Green Deal as the main project of the next tenure, make clear that the push coming from the young people has been important to set the path, and having the push that government needs to go further and be ambitious enough to be the 1.5 be possible. I also appreciate the appreciation of the role of ARENA that is capable to put together this analytical strengthening with also trying to be active more on the ground and having an open dialogue with the financial institution as the UN institution represented today by Damilola and Akin, two friends of ARENA, and we are going to work very closely with them in the next future. I think that also has been mentioned the role of the private arena is going to work more and more with the private, and we'll have also a representative from the private world coming in our next meeting, I guess, and it's also good to know. And when we think that it's difficult to stick it to be in the 1.5, arena can build on the experience and the theory of change that be outlined in the global renewable outlook in the post-COVID agenda. And we are ready to offer a definitive answer to the path to the 1.5 and carbon neutrality in our next grow in the first 2 weeks of April next year. So we feel all of us engaged. Thank you, and back to you, Madam President.
Thank you, Francesco, for all your comments. And my very final comment before the end of this agenda item is to particularly underline that we still need to work on women working on energy. I see that Mila, the minister from Togo, Kadri, the commissioner of the European Union, Andrea from Costa Rica, and Damilola from Sustainable Energy for All are the ladies joining me in this very interesting assembly. But still, the balance needs to be improved for the time to be. So, thank you so much for these comments. With this, we can conclude our consideration of agenda.